Millionaire thought he was marrying an ugly woman in arranged marriage, but he was shocked when she— Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Rain hammered the streets of Dallas that night, slicking the pavement in a silver sheen. Neon lights from late-night diners flickered against puddles, and the air carried the smell of asphalt and wet earth. Inside a cramped apartment above a laundromat, Adrian Carter, heir to a billion-dollar conglomerate, sat rigid at his father's mahogany desk. In front of him lay a thick envelope stamped with the Carter family seal. Inside his future. Read it. His father's voice echoed across the study, cold and unyielding. Adrien pulled out the document, eyes narrowing at the bold title. Marriage agreement. His chest tightened. You can't be serious. An arranged marriage? In this century? His father didn't flinch. The board is restless. Investors demand stability. You want control of Carter Enterprises? Then you'll marry the woman we chose. Without this, you lose everything. Adrien's jaw locked. He'd spent years proving himself in the business world, fighting the whispers that he only thrived because of his last name. But this was shackles disguised as tradition. Who is she? He demanded. His father slid over a glossy file. Adrien's gaze caught the name. Ella Thompson, 26, daughter of a bankrupt shipping family. A few grainy photographs clipped to the file showed a girl with oversized glasses, hair pulled into an unflattering bun, clothes shapeless and plain. Rumors swirled in society columns. Awkward, unattractive, desperate. Adrien scoffed, pushing the file back. So that's the plan? Marry me off to some ugly duckling so you can appease the board? You will sign, his father said flatly. Or you will step aside, and your cousin will take over. Decide before the week ends. The storm outside cracked, lightning splitting the sky. Adrien stared at the contract, every fiber of his pride screaming in revolt. He thought of the empire he'd built deal by deal, late nights, ruthless negotiations. Was it worth surrendering freedom for power? Across town, Ella Thompson closed the pharmacy door with trembling hands, clutching a paper bag of her mother's medication. The rain soaked through her thin jacket as she hurried down the street. Her wallet was almost empty. Every dollar counted. Rent overdue, medical bills mounting, and creditors circling like vultures. Her uncle's voice replayed in her head. If you don't agree to this arrangement, we lose the house. Your mother loses her care. We'll all be ruined. Ella swallowed hard, pulling the hood tighter. She hated the whispers, the pitying looks. Ugly, they called her. Invisible, they acted like she didn't exist. But she knew one truth. Her family needed her. If sacrificing herself meant her mother could breathe easier, she would endure it. The rain pounded harder. A bus splashed dirty water across her skirt, but she kept walking, determination burning in her chest. Somewhere across the city, the man she was supposed to marry cursed her name without even knowing her. Adrien poured himself a glass of whiskey, staring at the swirling amber liquid. Marry an ugly stranger just to keep what's mine? He muttered. He downed the drink, heat burning his throat. Fine. If that's the game, I'll play. But no one said I have to love her. The contract sat heavy on the desk, ink waiting for his signature. Outside, thunder rolled, a storm sealing 2 lives on a collision course, neither of them wanted yet, one that would change them forever. The morning after the storm, Adrian Carter sat in the corner of a sleek downtown cafe, tie loose, jaw tight. The contract lay folded in his briefcase, its weight heavier than any deal he had ever signed. His phone buzzed. A reminder from his father's assistant. Dinner with the Thompsons. 7 p.m. Brooks Bistro. He clenched his fist. So it was real now. No backing out. That evening, the rain had thinned to a drizzle. Adrien's black sedan rolled to a stop in front of Brooks Bistro, one of the city's oldest fine dining establishments. Its glowing windows promised warmth and civility, but his gut churned. He stepped out, greeted by the maitre d' with the deference reserved for his last name. Inside, chandeliers glowed golden over polished tables. The air smelled of truffle and aged wine. Adrien's eyes landed on a woman, already seated at the corner. His first thought, plain. Brown hair pulled back tightly, thick glasses, a modest gray dress. Not glamorous, not striking. He almost turned away. She stood. "Mr. Carter." Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly against the clutch she held. "Miss Thompson." His tone was clipped, professional. They sat across from each other, silence, stretching while waiters poured sparkling water. Adrien leaned back, studying her. "So this is the girl who's supposed to save the company's reputation?" Ella folded her hands in her lap. Her heart was racing, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. She had promised herself she would not cower, no matter what he thought of her. "I assume you've read the terms," Adrien said finally, sliding the contract across the table. "Yes." Her voice didn't waver. She had read every line, memorized each condition. 5 public events together, no interference in personal affairs, no expectation of love, just appearances. "You understand this is not real," he continued. "I never asked for it to be," she replied. "This is business for you. For me, it's survival." The bluntness caught him off guard. He expected tears, pleading, maybe false charm. Instead, she gave him honesty. He masked his surprise with a smirk. "At least we're clear." "Zay." A waiter appeared with menus. Adrien waved him off. "Bring the house special." Ella nodded politely, though her stomach twisted with nerves. She could feel the weight of other diners' eyes on them. She imagined what they saw: the billionaire heir, and the girl who didn't belong. "You don't have to look so terrified," Adrien said dryly, noticing how tightly she clutched her napkin. "I'm not terrified." Her chin lifted. "Just making sure I don't choke on the wrong fork." "Oh." For the first time, his mouth curved not quite a smile, but close. He set his glass down. "You'll adjust. It's only temporary." She held his gaze. "Temporary or not, I have my dignity. Don't mistake me for someone willing to be humiliated quietly." The words hung between them. Adrien blinked, then leaned back, hiding the flicker of respect that sparked unexpectedly in his chest. The dinner dragged on, conversation awkward but strangely charged. He asked about her background. She answered plainly: her mother's illness, her family's debt, her part-time work, tutoring neighborhood kids. No embellishment, no pretense. When the check came, Adrien signed without looking, then stood. "We'll proceed. Courthouse ceremony next week. Keep your schedule clear." Ella gathered her things, rising slowly. Her legs felt like stone, but her voice was steady. "I'll be there." Outside, the drizzle had turned to mist, curling under the streetlights. Adrien opened the car door, pausing as she passed. She didn't notice the way he watched her, the faintest crease in his brow. To him, she was still the plain girl forced into his world. Yet, something in her voice lingered. A quiet defiance he hadn't expected. As the driver pulled away, Adrien looked at the city skyline. "A contract marriage," he muttered. "Nothing more." But deep down, though he would never admit it, part of him wasn't entirely sure. 1 week later, the courthouse in downtown Dallas stood gray and unremarkable against the morning sky. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant. The ceremony was set in a small chamber, with only a notary, Adrien's lawyer, and 2 witnesses hired by his father. No music, no flowers, no joy, just business. Adrian Carter stood tall in a tailored navy suit, his expression unreadable. He checked his watch twice, impatience etched across his jaw. Then the door opened. Ella stepped in, wearing a simple cream dress. Her hair was pulled back neatly, no makeup except a touch of color on her lips. She wasn't glamorous, not in the way of society's polished debutantes, but there was something about the calm steadiness in her eyes. She walked forward without hesitation, as if daring him to look down on her again. The officiant cleared his throat. "We are gathered today." The words blurred. To Adrien, it felt like a contract signing. Another merger, another acquisition. He slipped the ring onto her finger with mechanical precision. Her hands were cold, but she did not flinch. When it was her turn, she repeated the vow firmly, her voice echoing slightly in the chamber. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Adrien forced a polite nod. Ella's lips pressed into the faintest smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. The witnesses signed the papers, and just like that, it was done. 2 strangers bound by ink and obligation. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets damp and gleaming. A black car waited at the curb. Adrien opened the door without speaking. Ella slid inside, clutching her small purse like a shield. The ride to the Carter estate was silent, the hum of the engine the only sound. When the gates finally swung open, Ella drew in a breath. The mansion loomed like something from a movie, towering stone columns, manicured gardens, windows glittering with wealth. It was another world entirely, one she had only glimpsed from afar. "Welcome to your new home," Adrien said flatly as they entered the grand foyer. Marble floors reflected the light of an enormous chandelier. Staff lined the hallway, silent and efficient. A housekeeper curtsied. "Mrs. Carter." The title made Ella stiffen. She wasn't used to it. Adrien noticed, though he said nothing. Instead, he gestured for a butler to escort her upstairs. Her assigned room was larger than her entire apartment back in the city. A king-sized bed dressed in silk sheets, antique furniture polished to a shine, floor to ceiling, windows overlooking the gardens. It was beautiful, yet cold, like a showroom, not a home. That evening, dinner was served at a long mahogany table. Adrien sat at one end, Ella at the other. The distance between them felt endless. Platters of steak, roasted vegetables, and wine filled the table, but the silence was heavier than the food. "How is your mother?" Adrien asked suddenly, his tone casual, almost obligatory. Ella looked up, surprised he'd remembered. "She's stable for now. The medication helps." He nodded, sipping his wine. "Good." The conversation died again. She focused on her plate, cutting carefully, determined not to embarrass herself. But every clink of silver against porcelain echoed in her ears. Afterward, Adrien excused himself to his study. Ella wandered the halls, her footsteps soft on the marble. She paused in front of a large painting, an oil portrait of Adrien's late mother, elegant and severe. The woman's eyes seemed to follow her, a silent reminder of the world she'd stepped into. Back in her room, Ella sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ring on her finger. It gleamed under the lamplight, heavy, foreign. She whispered to herself, "This is just survival, nothing more." Across the hall, Adrien poured himself another glass of whiskey. The fire crackled in the study as he leaned back in his leather chair. He told himself the same thing. This is just business, nothing more. Yet when he closed his eyes, he saw her steady gaze in the courthouse, the way she refused to shrink under his shadow. It unsettled him. For a man who thought he had predicted every outcome, Ella Thompson was becoming the one variable he hadn't accounted for. The days that followed were a blur of etiquette lessons, wardrobe fittings, and endless reminders from Adrien's assistant about upcoming public appearances. For Ella, it felt like being thrown into a world designed to expose her every flaw. One morning, a stylist team invaded her room, arms full of gowns and jewelry. "Mr. Carter requires you to accompany him to the winter gala next week," the head stylist announced, not asking but declaring. Ella stood frozen as dresses in deep satin and shimmering silk were draped over her frame. Adrien appeared at the doorway, watching silently. His eyes narrowed, not in disdain this time but in assessment. The plain girl from the courthouse was disappearing under the careful hands of couture. When Ella emerged in a navy gown that hugged her figure and caught the light like water, even he had to glance twice. She fumbled with the heels, nearly tripping. A blush rose on her cheeks. "I've never worn anything like this," she muttered. Adrien's lips twitched into the ghost of a smile. "You'll get used to it. Try not to break your neck before the gala." Her chin lifted. "Don't worry, I don't plan on embarrassing you." The following week, the Carter limousine pulled up to the grand entrance of the city's most opulent ballroom. Flashbulbs exploded like fireworks as the couple stepped onto the red carpet. Adrien's hand rested lightly on Ella's back, more for appearances than comfort. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras captured every angle. "Mr. Carter, how does it feel to be married?" "Mrs. Carter, is it true this was arranged?" Ella forced a calm smile, though her pulse thundered. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers, live music swelling in the air. Guests turned to stare. Whispers rippled. "That's her? The girl he married? She doesn't look like she belongs." At the banquet table, a man in a sharp tuxedo leaned close, his voice dripping with condescension. "So, Mrs. Carter, Tell me, how does it feel to marry into money? Quite the upgrade from wherever it is you came from. Ella froze, knife trembling slightly in her hand. She could feel dozens of eyes waiting for her humiliation. Adrien shifted, ready to intervene, but before he could speak, Ella met the man's gaze head-on. I married a man, not his money, she said evenly. And wherever I came from, at least people there still know the meaning of respect. A hush swept the table. The man leaned back, startled. Adrien's jaw tightened, not in anger, but in something closer to pride. Later, on the dance floor, he guided her through the steps, his hand firm on her waist. Not bad, he murmured. Surprised? She asked, arching a brow. Very, he admitted. His eyes lingered a fraction too long before he looked away. That night, back at the mansion, Ella slipped out of the gown, hanging it carefully. She caught her reflection in the mirror, a girl transformed, yet still herself beneath the layers. She thought of the whispers, the cutting remark, and the way she had stood tall. For the first time since the contract, she felt something stir in her chest. Across the hall, Adrien poured his usual drink but didn't finish it. Instead, he found himself replaying her words at the table. I married a man, not his money. It echoed in his mind, sharper than any deal he had ever struck. For a man who had promised himself this marriage was only business, Adrian Carter was beginning to realize the lines were blurring, and the plain girl he once dismissed was no longer so easy to ignore. The gala marked a turning point, though neither Adrien nor Ella admitted it aloud. After that night, appearances together became routine. Charity luncheons, corporate dinners, even the quarterly board reception, Ella stood at his side, calm and composed. Yet beneath the polished facade, a strange tension simmered. One evening, weeks later, the Carter estate was unusually quiet. The staff had retired early, and Adrien found Ella alone in the music room. She sat at the grand piano, fingers gliding softly over the keys. The melody was unpolished, but gentle. A lullaby that seemed to fill the cavernous hall with warmth. He lingered in the doorway, watching. For the first time, she looked entirely herself. No gowns, no photographers, no expectations. Just a young woman lost in music. Ella startled when she noticed him. I didn't mean to wake the house. You didn't. His voice was softer than usual. He stepped closer, leaning against the piano. I didn't know you played. She shrugged. Not well. My mom taught me when I was little. It helps when I can't sleep. Adrien studied her, the way her eyes softened when she spoke of her mother, the way her hands rested gently on the ivory keys. Something cracked in him, something he had long kept sealed. You're not what I expected, he said quietly. Ella glanced up. And what did you expect? He almost smirked. Someone willing to wear the ring and stay silent. Someone who wouldn't challenge me. Her lips curved faintly. Sorry to disappoint. He should have walked away. But instead, he stayed, listening as she played another tune, the melody carrying them into a silence neither wanted to break. Later that week, at a high-profile corporate banquet, Ella faced her first true test. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashing. The event was meant to celebrate a merger Adrien had orchestrated, but whispers spread quickly. Contract marriage, sham, publicity stunt. Midway through dinner, a journalist rose boldly and called out, Mr. Carter, is it true your marriage is only for show? Adrien stiffened, ready to deflect, but Ella spoke first. Her voice was clear, strong enough to cut through the noise. Our marriage is real enough for me to be here tonight, standing beside him. Whatever else people choose to believe is their choice. But respect, I believe, is not optional. The room fell silent. Cameras clicked, capturing her poise. Adrien's chest tightened, pride mingling with something deeper, something dangerous. Afterward, as they rode home in the limousine, the city lights flashing by, Adrien finally broke the silence. You didn't have to defend me. Ella turned, meeting his gaze. I wasn't defending you, I was defending myself. For a long moment, their eyes held, unspoken words sparking in the air. Then Adrien looked away, jaw tight, hiding the faintest flicker of admiration. That night, alone in his study, he stared at the flames in the fireplace, replaying her voice over and over. She was supposed to be plain, forgettable, easy to dismiss. Instead, she was becoming the one person who unsettled his world. And across the hall, Ella lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had promised herself this was survival, nothing more. Yet when she thought of the look in Adrian's eyes that night, she wasn't sure she still believed it. Winter deepened, bringing sharp winds that rattled the windows of the Carter estate. The house felt cavernous at night, echoes bouncing through marble halls. One evening, after another relentless board meeting, Adrien returned late. Expecting silence, he found a faint glow spilling from the terrace. Ella was there, wrapped in a shawl, staring at the city lights in the distance. A cup of tea steamed beside her. She didn't flinch when he approached, though she hadn't heard his footsteps. "You should be asleep," Adrien said, voice low. "I could say the same to you." She sipped her tea, eyes still fixed on the skyline. He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. The cold bit at his skin, but he didn't care. For once, the silence between them wasn't hostile. It was almost fragile. "You don't like this life, do you?" he asked suddenly. Ella turned her head, surprised. "What makes you say that?" "You don't play the part," he said. "You don't crave the cameras, the status. You'd disappear into the background if you could." Her lips curved faintly. "I never asked for this, but I made a choice. For my mother, for my family." Adrien studied her profile under the soft light. "And for me?" he asked, before he could stop himself. Ella blinked. "This isn't about you." Her words should have stung, but instead they settled in his chest like a strange relief. She wasn't here for power, or money, or him. She was here because she was strong enough to carry burdens he could barely imagine. For the first time, he confessed, "I hate this life too. The board, the shareholders, even my father, they all see me as a tool, a name, not a person." Ella's eyes softened. "Then, maybe we're not so different." The terrace fell quiet again, the city's hum filling the spaces their words left behind. When the wind grew harsher, Adrien slipped off his coat and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up, startled. "You'll freeze," she whispered. "I've survived worse." He tried to sound casual, but his pulse betrayed him. Their eyes locked, a charge in the air neither could ignore. For a brief moment, the contract, the rules, the distance, they all dissolved. There was just him, her, and the realization that something real was clawing its way through the pretense. Later that night, Ella sat at her vanity, fingers brushing the edge of the ring she once hated. She thought of the coat still wrapped around her shoulders, its warmth lingering. She told herself it was nothing, just courtesy. But her reflection betrayed her, a flush in her cheeks, a softness in her eyes. Across the hall, Adrien poured himself a drink and didn't touch it. He leaned against the window, watching the faint light still glowing from her room. He had vowed this marriage would remain an act. Yet, with each passing day, that vow felt weaker. For the first time since signing the contract, Adrian Carter feared something he couldn't control: his own heart. The shift between them was subtle but undeniable. Adrien no longer dismissed Ella's presence. He sought it, even in silence. And Ella, though cautious, no longer walked with her shoulders hunched. She carried herself with quiet dignity, no matter how many whispers followed her. But comfort never lasted long in the Carter empire. At the next quarterly gala, the ballroom buzzed, not with admiration, but with rumors. Tabloids had begun circling, hinting that Adrien's marriage was nothing more than a staged performance. Someone had leaked fragments of the contract, enough to ignite scandal. As Adrien and Ella entered the hall, the air was thick with judgment. Cameras snapped more aggressively than usual. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Carter, did you marry Miss Thompson only to secure your inheritance?" Adrien's jaw clenched, but before he could speak, another voice cut through. His cousin, Daniel, strode toward them with a smug smile. "Come now, Adrien, don't be too hard on them. People deserve the truth, don't they?" His words dripped with venom, designed to wound. Ella froze, her heart hammering. Adrien's eyes narrowed. He knew instantly Daniel had leaked the contract. It was exactly the kind of move his cousin would make to edge closer to the company throne. The music faltered, conversations stilled, every pair of eyes turning toward them. Ella felt the heat of 100 stares. Her throat tightened, but she held her head high. "Is it true?" another reporter demanded. "This marriage was never real?" Adrien tightened his grip on Ella's hand. For a fraction of a second, she felt his pulse racing against hers. Then he released it, stepping forward. His expression was carved from stone. "We'll make no comment tonight." But Daniel wasn't finished. He raised his glass, voice loud enough to carry. "A toast, then, to the Carters, masters of contracts, whether in business or marriage." Laughter rippled cruelly across the room. Ella's chest burned. She wanted to disappear, but pride rooted her in place. She refused to give Daniel the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Still, when she glanced at Adrien, she saw something she hadn't expected, doubt flickering in his eyes. For the first time since their vows, he wasn't looking at her as an equal. He was questioning. The ride home was suffocating. Rain lashed against the car windows, echoing the storm inside. Adrien sat rigid, his silence heavier than any accusation. Finally, Ella spoke. "You think I had something to do with this?" He didn't answer immediately. His gaze stayed fixed on the blurred city lights outside. "Who else knew the details?" Her breath caught. "You think I betrayed you?" "I don't know what to think," he said flatly. The words sliced deeper than any insult. Ella's throat tightened, but she forced her voice to stay steady. "I may not have your name, your money, or your empire, but I have my honor. If you can't see that, then maybe this contract is all it ever was." When they reached the estate, she walked past him without another word, her footsteps sharp against the marble floor. Adrien remained in the foyer, torn between anger and something far more dangerous, fear that he had just destroyed the fragile trust they had begun to build. Upstairs, Ella closed the door to her room and leaned against it, chest heaving. She had sworn to herself not to care. But somewhere along the way, she had started to. And now the one man she had defended in public doubted her in private. In the dark silence of his study, Adrien poured a drink and didn't touch it. The storm outside roared, but inside, his own storm was louder. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to trust her. But in his world, betrayal was the rule, not the exception. And yet, when he closed his eyes, it wasn't Daniel's smirk he saw. It was Ella's wounded gaze, sharp with pride, soft with pain. The days after the gala were colder than any winter storm. Adrien and Ella lived under the same roof, yet silence stretched between them like an unspoken wall. Meals were brief, eye contact rare. She buried herself in caring for her mother, visiting the clinic quietly, while he drowned in board meetings and late nights at the office. But truth has a way of surfacing. One evening, Adrien's assistant stormed into his study with a folder of documents. "You need to see this." Inside were financial records, wire transfers leading straight to Daniel, payments to a gossip magazine, timed perfectly with the contract leak. Adrien's stomach twisted. He had doubted Ella, yet the proof of betrayal pointed elsewhere all along. For the first time in years, shame hit him harder than anger. He thought of her steady eyes the night she defended him before the press. The way her voice had not wavered, while his had stayed silent. He had questioned the one person who deserved trust. The next morning, Adrien made a choice. That evening, Ella returned from the clinic to find the grand gallery wing of the Carter estate transformed. Soft lights glowed over white walls, every frame filled with canvases, her canvases. Sketches she had abandoned in old notebooks, paintings she thought lost. Even the charcoal studies she had tossed aside in despair. Somehow, he had found them all. At the center, a plaque read, "The Art of Ella Carter." She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Adrien stepped forward. No suit tonight, only a simple shirt, sleeves rolled. His eyes carried none of their usual steel. "I doubted you," he said quietly. "And I was wrong. Daniel was behind everything. You deserved better than suspicion. You deserved faith. This," he gestured to the gallery, "is my apology, and my choice, not a contract, not an arrangement. You." Tears burned Ella's eyes, though she blinked them back. "Why would you do this?" "Because somewhere along the way," his voice cracked slightly, "you stopped being a stranger. You became the only truth I have left." Silence stretched, heavy but tender. Ella's heart pounded. She could walk away, keep her dignity, hold the line she had drawn, or she could step forward into the risk she swore she'd never take. Her hand trembled, but she reached for his. "If we do this," she whispered, There can be no more lies. Adrian's grip tightened, firm, certain. No more lies. Only us. In the glow of her own artwork, framed by the very man who once dismissed her, Ella realized the contract that had bound them meant nothing now. What bound them was choice raw, terrifying, and real. The gallery became their turning point. From that night, there was no talk of contracts, no mention of obligations. The ring on Ella's finger no longer felt like a shackle, but a promise. Weeks later, the Carters hosted another gala, this time on their own terms. The ballroom gleamed with crystal and light, but unlike before, Ella did not shrink beneath the gaze of strangers. She walked beside Adrien, her gown simple yet radiant, chin lifted with quiet pride. Whispers still followed her, but the cruel edge had faded. Tonight, the story was different. Midway through the evening, Adrien raised his glass. The room fell silent. When I first entered this marriage, I thought it was just another deal. A contract to sign, a box to tick. But I was wrong. What I found was the only person brave enough to stand beside me, not for wealth, not for power, but for truth. He turned to Ella, his voice steady yet tender. Tonight, I want to set the record straight. This woman is not my arrangement. She is my wife, my partner, and if she'll allow me, the love of my life. Gasps rippled across the room, cameras flashed, but all Ella saw was the man before her, no longer the cold heir she had married in duty, but a man stripped of pride, standing raw before the world. Adrien reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a ring, not the one from their contract, but a new band, delicate yet timeless. He sank to one knee, the crowd erupting in murmurs. Ella Thompson Carter, he said, will you marry me not by contract, not by condition, but by choice? Tears welled in her eyes. She remembered the courthouse, the whispers, the loneliness of being called plain and unworthy. And she remembered the gallery, the coat on her shoulders, the look in his eyes when he finally chose her. Yes, she whispered, voice trembling but clear. Yes, I will. The room burst into applause, but for Ella and Adrien, the world had narrowed to just the two of them. He slid the new ring onto her finger, kissed her hand, then pulled her into an embrace. Later, as the night wound down, they slipped outside onto the terrace. The city lights glittered in the distance, the same skyline Ella had once stared at in silence. Adrien held her close, his voice low. The biggest shock wasn't that you were beautiful. It was realizing I can't imagine a life without you. Ella smiled, resting her head against his chest. For the first time, the weight lifted. No contracts, no conditions. Only love, hard-won and real. And so the marriage that began as a bargain ended as the very thing neither of them believed in at the start. A forever built not on duty, but on choice.